They just don't get Israel. And by the way, they don't get the Palestinians either. If they keep saying in Washington that Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinian people, but everywhere that our forces have been in Gaza indicates that the opposite is true. It's not that Hamas has forced itself on the Palestinians. It's the Palestinians created Hamas because it's a reflection of who they are. They're a genocidal people directed as a people towards the goal of annihilating the Jews. And we saw that very clearly on October 7th, obviously. So that's where they're directed. That's where they've always been directed. And, since well before Israel was founded. And so, this is an organic expression of the will of the Palestinian people. And the United States has constantly ignored that. So the idea that you're going to get a ceasefire that's going to be stable in any form by giving Hamas this victory is insane. They're not going to be sitting quietly. They're going to be triumphant, and they're going to be celebrating their incredible victory for their jihad against the Jews. So that's one thing. It's just not going to work. And the other thing that's not going to work is that they're not going to get Israel to capitulate. I mean, Benny Gantz, they had another poll this week in Channel 14 that showed that Benny Gantz is now, trailing Netanyahu by 9 points in public approval, and that his party is trailing Likud by 5 mandates in the Knesset, 25 to Likud to 20 for Gantz. And, if he leaves the government, then he loses his position as a centrist, because now he's just doing the Americans' bidding and he's advancing the policies of the radical left. And when you add to that the fact that Avigdor Lieberman and his party won't join Gantz-led party today, Lieberman thinks that he can come in as a spoiler and take whatever right-wing mandates may be sort of parked with Gantz because he's in the government, and they'll move to Lieberman because Lieberman wants victory and Gantz is preaching capitulation. So, because the Israeli people don't want to capitulate. Amit Segal, the sort of top political commentator in Israel, said last night following Gantz's press conference, he said, it's very strange because Gantz, like the Americans, because it's really, again, I think that his whole speech was written by the Americans. I think everything that he says is either aligned with the Americans or written by the Americans, but whatever. He constantly refers to the government of Israel, and particularly the two smaller, more ideological parties on the right, the Jewish Power Party led by Itamar Ben-Gvir and the Religious Zionism Party led by Bezalel Smotrich, as fringe parties. But they have more mandates than Benny Gantz does. And moreover, their positions are supported by a much larger percentage of the Israeli people than Gantz's positions, his capitulationist positions are. So that the marginal actor here, oddly, given that he's the one who has two people who are in the war cabinet and they who represent a much larger group of Israelis have no representative on the war cabinet, right? But he is the marginal force in politics in Israel, and they are not. And so, when you take that into account, and you take into account the incredible backlash that Gallant faced after he made a statement last Monday that, you have 73% of right-wing voters who are demanding that, or who told posters for Channel 14 that they want Gallant fired. They want Netanyahu to fire him from his position as defense minister. And you have a situation where the Americans, again, are just reading the situation wrong. They will get their anarchists to massively increase their civil disobedience. But they're not going to be met with a fearful public or a public who thinks that they have a point. They're going to be met with a public that has absolutely no patience for their nonsense. And it's a different situation. Back last year when these people were lighting the country on fire, I think that most Israelis were confused about what was going on. You had wall-to-wall coverage by the media saying that Bibi was evil, that he wants to be a tyrant, that he wants to be a dictator or whatever. And even if people didn't think it was true, they didn't really understand it. It was too esoteric for them to get. And you had this incredibly sympathetic coverage all the time, saturation from all of the media outlets almost on behalf of these anarchists that were lighting Israel on fire and having general strikes and all of the rest of it. But now, everybody understands what the stakes are. We all lived through October 7th. And we've all, been engaged very deeply in what's happening in our country ever since. And they just aren't going to be met with the same public that greeted them with suspicion, but not with rejection in 2023. And so I think that Biden doesn't get it at all, and the government may fall, and that'll make it'll make things more difficult politically to proceed with the war. But I think that the overwhelming majority of the public will reward Netanyahu for staying the course. His chances of re-election will be higher. The chance that he'll have defectors in the Likud will be smaller, and the government will survive. And, it'll happen slowly. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the North, honestly. I mean, that not only Zaytun's report, but other indicators that I've been receiving from people, and particularly the weapons embargo that Biden has effected against Israel, both declaratively and also on the ground in many respects, makes us question, are we going to be in a position even to carry out this war that we need to carry out in the North? And we have to fight. We probably need many of the forces that are now in Gaza in the North in order to do it. So it's a very delicate thing that's going to take a long time to undertake. So I think that what we're looking at is a prolonged conflict of everybody, not everybody, but, the vast majority of Israelis are praying that Trump gets elected in November, and that we'll have a very different policy emanating from Washington in January. And we want to have a leader in place in Israel under both circumstances that's either going to be able to stand up to American pressure or make the most of a friendly U.S. administration at this time. So I think that what we're going to see is the war being dragged out. I think you're going to see plotting, movement and advancement of our forces in Gaza. It's going to be hard. You're going to see an increased movement of forces from Gaza to the north as we get ready to deal with Hezbollah in a more serious way. But, I'm not really sure. I mean, we have until January, we're going to have the administration in power at a minimum, no matter what happens in the election. That's a very long time from now. And that's 8 months. And a lot can happen in 8 months. Look at how much has happened in 7 months since October 7th. And, it's anybody's guess how things can go. But I don't think that Gallant's challenge that's now been joined by Gantz and Jake Sullivan's appearance here in Israel will overthrow the government. I don't think that that's going to happen. And I think that so long as the government is in power, no matter what else happens on the ground, Israel is going to stay the course. Whether more quickly or more slowly is an open question, but my money is on the more slowly, but that will proceed because we don't have any other choice.